Welcome back. Hopefully, you now know that even if you don't consider yourself creative, that yes, you are a creative thinker. We'll move on to the rising action of your learning story, but first I want to briefly address plagiarism. As far as fiction goes, don't do it. It's trickier for nonfiction. The University of North Carolina Chapel Hill Writing Center defines plagiarism as the deliberate or reckless representation of another's words, thoughts, or ideas as one's own without attribution and connection with submission of academic work, whether graded or otherwise. Plagiarism.com suggests that the best way to prevent plagiarism is to educate students on how to properly conduct research, cite, quote, and produce unique and original work. We won't go into further details about correctly citing or building on the ideas of others to make it your own. However, I encourage you to do your own research on the subject. Then there's plagiarism paranoia, the fear that if you share your work, someone will claim your ideas or even the work itself. Suing for copyright infringement is complicated, time-consuming, and costly, as in thousands of dollars. However, for most writers, just getting people to read your work is challenging enough. Yes, someone else may run with an idea of yours, but you can't copyright ideas, and besides, no one writes the way you do. The more you cultivate your unique writing voice, the better you protect your work. Let's talk a little about from whom you can get feedback. Friends, family, or significant others are your primary support group in general. Maybe they are writers, and maybe they aren't. Fellow writers can give you a more refined critique, especially if within a writers group or a peer review group. People tend to feed off of one another in groups. In these cases, disagreement among participants is your friend. You can learn a lot from how they react to the work and how it inspires them. Professional editors, whether retained by you or a publisher, likely have developed their own way of giving feedback. They come with an agenda. They want to help make your work saleable. They may ask from you more than other critiquers. Let's move on to talking about how you will present your work. Give it to someone to read and mark your draft. The good reason to do this is that your work is meant to be read and the feedback will be in written form. The not so good reason is that it can invite the critiquer to focus on edits or details rather than larger issues. Read your work out loud to a group. The good reason to do this is that you can use your reading voice to reinforce the meaning of your work. The not so good reason is the same, along with the fact that you can't listen to how your work works or doesn't work. Have someone else read it out loud to you and or the group. You set aside your copy, sit back, and listen. The good reason is that it forces you to hear how well your work works and how someone else relays the meaning. Yes, you may cringe at parts that don't work, but this feedback alone can help you in a rewrite. Whenever you get feedback, make sure it's somehow in writing. It's easy to assume that you'll be able to remember the feedback spoken to you, but that's a bad assumption. Perhaps with practice you will better be able to eke out helpful feedback when given orally, but right now you're developing new skills and habits. There are a variety of ways to assure the feedback is eventually in written form. You ask a critiquer or your writers group to complete a feedback form. You can use the Dramified critique form, someone else's framework, or create your own. Ideally, you include specific questions about how they experienced your work. Recording and transcribing oral feedback assures an accurate depiction of what was said. This is helpful when dealing with one critiquer or a group. You can take notes. If you can avoid this scenario, please do. Your notes may not be accurate, or you may not hear what is said correctly. When in a group, have someone else take notes for you. This can be helpful, but the person taking notes may end up translating the feedback in ways that were not intended. Some critiquers will prefer writing the feedback in prose or some other format. Take advantage of this. There are numerous feedback forms available in books or online. You may or may not choose to use them, or you might tailor one to fit your needs. Here are a few suggestions. If you want feedback from a wide range of people you know in person or online, Rating surveys can be helpful. Your questions can point to specific concerns you have about your work. With enough respondents, you can even build a database. The best part of using a survey is that you are better able to see patterns of feedback. The compliment sandwich is a traditional approach to giving feedback of any kind. You start with something positive, venture into the negative, and end on a positive note. The dramified critique form can be used as is or modified to suit your needs. You can download a PDF. Let's briefly go through the format itself. We'll use examples of constructive feedback from Arthur's peers. We'll tackle poorly stated feedback in a later lesson. What was your gut reaction? This type of feedback may not be as helpful as it is illuminating. The hard part for you is that this question invites the critiquer to give you an unfiltered, spontaneous response. The more powerful their response, especially if negative, the more you know your content is having an effect. Also, giving critiquers the opportunity to react can engender a more honest discussion. Describe or summarize the work. Learning how others perceive your work will give you insight into how well you are communicating your intention. Their overview could include subtext or deeper meaning you hadn't consciously intended. How does the work mean? For nonfiction, this can point to how the arguments and evidence support your intention or thesis and your conclusions. For fiction, this can point to how the character evolves and overcomes their limitations, or how the plot arc gives meaning. Do you have any cultural concerns? If so, what are they? This can include racial sensitivities such as stereotypes or religious assumptions that the reader doesn't share. That's not to say you need to be politically correct, just consistent. Did the work resonate with you personally, and if so, how? You invite the critiquers to relay personal experience or opinions. You can better see how your work provokes reaction. This information may even serve as additional research and deepen the meaning of your work. For whom are you writing? You may be writing to submit to your instructor. However, if you're interested in an audience beyond that, identify who they would be, like an age range or genre. Anyone who will read it is not an answer. Specific questions. This is a way to address concerns you have about your work. You can also encourage the critiquer to ask you questions. You may not have immediate answers, but thinking about the questions can give you deeper insight. A more formal approach to receiving feedback can help you feel safer and more secure with the critiquing process. For others, it won't matter as much. However, let me repeat, get it in writing. Now go ahead and post your essay on the discussion board. That is your only assignment. For some of you, piece of cake. For others, not so much. Make sure you put draft in the subject line. Talk at you soon.